In the heart of Africa, where the skies stretch wide and endless, and the evening sun paints the earth with strokes of gold, there lived a girl named Amara. The village she called home was alive with tradition, the rhythm of drums at night, the laughter of children chasing goats across the dusty paths, and the wisdom of elders gathered beneath the ancient baobab tree. Life was simple, yet for Amara, it was far from kind. Her name carried whispers, carried sorrow, carried stories. From village to village, people spoke of her, the little girl who lost everything when the floodwaters rose and swept away her parents. They said the spirit of the river had stolen her family, leaving her in the care of an aunt whose heart was as cold as stone. And so, Amara's tale was passed along not because of wealth or beauty, but because it carried three things: the pain of loss, the cruelty of envy, and the miracle of destiny. Yes, this is the story of the orphan who was mistreated, until the day a billionaire stepped into her life and changed her fate forever. Amara was only 7 years old when tragedy struck like a storm from the heavens. The rains fell for days without end, and the river that once gave life to the village turned into a raging monster. In one dreadful night, the flood swept away her parents, their farm, and every trace of the happy life she once knew. When the waters finally calmed, all that remained was silence, and little Amara, an orphan, alone in the world. With no choice, she was placed in the care of her aunt, Mama Ifeoma. But instead of love, she found only bitterness. Mama Ifeoma's heart, hardened by greed and envy, saw the little girl not as family, but as a burden, as an extra mouth to feed. From the very first day, Amara's childhood was stolen. While other children chased chickens through the dusty paths, she was sent to the forest to gather firewood, the heavy bundles bending her small back. While her cousins splashed joyfully at the river, Amara was forced to fetch water until her tiny arms ached. At mealtimes, she cooked, pounding yam, stirring soup, roasting maize, but when the food was ready, she was not welcome at the table. She would watch as her cousins ate until their bellies were full, while she licked her fingers, surviving on scraps, or sometimes, nothing at all. At night, when the stars blinked over the quiet village, Amara curled up in the corner of the hut, shivering against the cold. Her stomach growled, but her voice whispered only prayers to the mother she would never see again. "Mama, if the spirits of the ancestors can hear me, please, do not let me suffer like this forever." Her words were soft, but the sky above remembered them. As the seasons passed, little Amara blossomed into a young woman. Her once fragile body grew strong from endless labor, her face gentle yet marked with quiet resilience. But with every year that passed, her aunt's cruelty also deepened. Whenever a young man came to the village, curious about the quiet, hard-working girl, Mama Ifeoma was quick to poison their thoughts. With a mocking laugh she would say, "Do not waste your time. She is nothing but an orphan, a girl with no name, no dowry, and nothing to offer." Her words were sharp, cutting deeper than any knife, and they spread quickly through the village like wildfire. If Amara dropped a calabash by accident, Mama Ifeoma would drag her into the open square, scolding her so loudly that the entire village turned their heads. "Look at her," she would shout. "Useless. Even the food she cooks, she spoils. Without me, she would already be begging on the streets." And the villagers, though some pitied her, said nothing. Amara's heart broke many times, but she never fought back. Her eyes lowered, her lips sealed, she swallowed her tears like bitter medicine. She knew that arguing would only make the punishment worse. So she carried her pain in silence. When others mocked her, she whispered to herself, "One day, the river of life will change its course. One day, my story will not end in sorrow." For deep within her spirit, Amara carried something her aunt could never destroy: hope. One year, when the harvest season had filled the barns and the yam barns overflowed with bounty, the village prepared for its grandest celebration, the festival of the harvest. It was the time when the air itself seemed alive with the steady rhythm of drums, the laughter of children racing through dusty paths, and the sweet aroma of roasted goat meat and spice stew drifting from every compound. Traders arrived from faraway lands, bringing with them beads that glittered like morning dew, fine fabrics dyed in the deepest indigo, and trinkets that shimmered in the sun. The village square transformed into a sea of color, women adorned in dazzling encore wrappers and coral beads, men in flowing abbadas and caps tilted proudly, while dancers painted in chalk swirled gracefully to the music. For the villagers, it was a time of joy, a time of pride, a time of unity. But for Amara, it was a reminder of her place in her aunt's eyes. While her cousins toured in bright new clothes, their wrists jingling with fresh bangles, Amara was ordered to wear the same old rags that clung loosely to her body. Her hair, unkempt, was tied back in haste, and her feet were bare. "Stay behind the hut," Mama Ifioma barked. "Do not let anyone see you. You will bring shame to this family." And so, while the whole village gathered in celebration, Amara remained in the shadows, hidden behind the mud walls of her aunt's hut. She could hear the laughter, smell the food, and catch glimpses of dancers twirling past. Her heart ached, but deep inside, she whispered to herself, "Maybe one day, I too will dance in the light." What she did not know was that fate, patient and watchful, had been waiting for this very moment. For that festival was the day her story would change forever. That evening, as the festival drums echoed across the land, something unusual stirred the dust of the village road. In the distance, a convoy of black jeeps rolled in, their engines growling like thunder against the chatter of the crowd. The villagers paused, wide-eyed, for such machines were rarely seen in their humble square. Children ran behind, cheering and pointing, while elders straightened their wrappers, whispering, "Who could this be?" From the first jeep stepped a tall, dignified man dressed in a flowing white agbada embroidered with gold. His name was Chief Obinna, a billionaire businessman whose wealth was spoken of across Africa, yet whose heart never forgot his roots. He had returned to honor his ancestors and to bless the land that had birthed him. With every step he took, the crowd parted in respect. He greeted the elders, handed gifts to the children, and placed envelopes of money into the hands of struggling farmers. His generosity spread smiles across Efe. And yet, as he moved through the crowd, his eyes began to wander, searching as though something, or someone, had caught his spirit's attention. At the edge of the square, near the shadows of Mama Ifeoma's hut, he saw her. A young woman, half hidden, her dress torn and faded, her feet bare. But it was not her clothes that drew his gaze, it was her eyes. Eyes that carried pain, yet glowed with a quiet dignity. Eyes that told a story of sorrow and strength. Chief Obinna stopped in his tracks. For a long moment, the world around him seemed to fade, the drums quieted, the chatter dimmed, until it felt as though he was staring at destiny itself. "Who is that young woman?" he asked, his voice firm but curious. Mama Ifeoma, startled, rushed forward, her laughter sharp and forced. "Oh, that one," she sneered. "Pay her no mind, Chief. She is just a servant girl, of no importance." But Chief Obinna's gaze never left Amara. He saw the way she lowered her head in humility, the way her hands were callous from years of labor, the way her very presence shone despite the rags she wore. And in that moment, deep in his heart, he knew. This was no servant girl. This was a soul carrying a story yet to be told. He turned to Mama Ifeoma, his voice calm yet unyielding. "Servant girl or not, respect and grace cannot be hidden. Tell me her name." And Amara, trembling but steady, stepped forward and whispered softly. "My name is Amara." Chief Obinna stayed in the village for many days. He was no ordinary man, though wealth and power followed him wherever he went. He carried himself with humility. He walked among the farmers in the scorching sun, lending a hand as they tilled the earth. He sat with the elders beneath the ancient Iroko tree, listening with respect to their wisdom. Children adored him, for he shared sweets and coins, while the youth admired his generosity and his booming laughter that carried like a drumbeat. Yet, even as he smiled and played his part, his thoughts never strayed far from the girl in the shadows. Amara. The memory of her eyes, clear as a river after the rains, haunted him. Something about her presence, her quiet dignity despite the rags, stirred his heart in ways he could not explain. Curiosity turned to concern, and concern soon led him to the truth. Through whispers of kind neighbors and the lips of an old woman who could no longer bear the injustice, Obinna learned that Amara was no servant. She was the only child of his late friend, Chukwudi, the man who had once saved his life many years ago during a terrible accident. The revelation struck him like lightning. His chest tightened as grief and fury mingled within him. Chukwudi, a man of honor, had died too soon, leaving behind this precious daughter. And instead of being cherished, she had been reduced to a shadow, despised and mistreated in her own bloodline's home. That night, Chief Obinna could not sleep. He paced the guest hut, his fist clenched, his heart burning with anger at Mama Ifeoma's cruelty. "How dare she," he muttered. "How could anyone treat the child of my brother in spirit this way?" By morning, his decision was firm. Amara's suffering would end, not tomorrow, not someday, but now. Her days of humiliation were over. He would honor his friend's memory, restore Amara's dignity, and show the village that even in rags, true worth can never be hidden. For the gods had brought him here not by chance, but by destiny. On the final night of the festival, the village square was lit with blazing torches, their flames dancing against the starry sky. Drums thundered, flutes sang, and the people gathered in excitement, not knowing what awaited them. At the center stood Chief Obinna, tall and commanding, his agbada embroidered with golden threads that shimmered in the firelight. His presence silenced the crowd. Raising his staff of authority, his deep voice boomed across the square. "Tonight, I honor a woman of dignity. Her name is Amara." A stunned silence fell. Then gasps rippled through the crowd like a wave. People craned their necks, whispering, "Amara. The girl in rags. The one Mama Ifeoma hides away." Mama Ifeoma trembled, her heart pounding in shame. Beads of sweat glistened on her forehead as all eyes turned to her. She tried to force a smile, but her lips quivered. Chief Obinna's gaze never wavered. He stretched his hand toward the shadows where Amara stood, confusion and fear clouding her eyes. Gently, he called her forward. "Step into the light, my child." Slowly, Amara walked, her bare feet brushing the dust. The rags she wore could not dim the quiet dignity she carried, nor the radiance of her soul. When she reached Chief Obinna, he placed a protective hand on her shoulder. "She is not a servant," he declared, his voice carrying both power and tenderness. "She is the daughter of my dear friend, the man who once saved my life. And from this day, she will never suffer again." The crowd erupted in shock. Some clapped in joy, others covered their mouths in disbelief. Women ululated, their voices piercing the night air in celebration. Elders nodded, murmuring that justice had finally come. Mama Ifeoma's knees buckled, and she collapsed into the dust. "Forgive me," she cried, her voice breaking. But her words were drowned by the cheers of the people as Chief Obinna lifted Amara's hand high, as though presenting a queen. For the first time in years, Amara smiled, not a timid smile, but one full of freedom and hope. That night, under the glow of the harvest moon, her destiny was reborn. From that night onward, Amara's life transformed in ways she had never dared to dream. Chief Obinna took her under his care, and the bustling city became her new home, a place filled with towering buildings, busy markets, and schools where knowledge flowed. She studied diligently, learning not only letters and numbers but also the wisdom of life, the strength of character, and the power of resilience. Years passed, and the little orphan girl who once shivered in the corner of her aunt's hut grew into a woman of poise, intelligence, and beauty, yet her heart remained humble and kind. She became known not just for her wealth or elegance, but for her wisdom and compassion, qualities that drew people to her and inspired those who had suffered like she once did. Meanwhile, Mama Ifeoma could not escape the whispers of the village. Her cruelty and deceit were remembered long after the festival had ended. Whenever villagers passed her home, they muttered quietly, shaking their heads. Her wealth, her possessions, even her pride, could not shield her from the judgment of the people. But Amara bore no grudge. She understood that anger and bitterness were chains that could imprison the soul. One bright morning, years after her transformation, she returned to the village. The familiar dust rose beneath her polished shoes, and the old huts seemed smaller now, almost gentle in their simplicity. She found her aunt seated outside, her eyes widening in shock as Amara approached. Without hesitation, Amara bowed respectfully, her voice calm and clear. "I hold no anger against you. What you meant for harm, the spirits turned into my blessing." The words hung in the air like a soft drumbeat, resonating with forgiveness and the quiet power of a heart that had learned life's true lessons. Mama Ifeoma's lips trembled. Shame and regret filled her gaze, but also awe, for she realized that the girl she had once tormented had risen far above her cruelty. Amara walked through the village that day with a serene smile. Children ran to greet her, elders nodded with respect, and the wind seemed to carry a promise that no darkness, no matter how cruel, could ever extinguish the light within a person who held faith, patience, and kindness in her heart. And so, the tale of Amara became legend, a story told from one generation to the next, reminding all who heard it that destiny cannot be stolen, and the spirit that remains pure will always find its way to greatness. And so, Amara's story spread across the land, carried by the whispers of villagers, the songs of children, and the tales told by elders beneath the baobab trees. From the bustling streets of the city to the quiet corners of distant villages, people spoke of the little orphan girl who endured cruelty, yet rose with grace and courage. She became more than a woman, she became a symbol, a queen in her own right, not by birth or wealth alone, but by the strength of her character, the wisdom of her choices, and the purity of her heart. Her life proved, beyond doubt, that destiny cannot be buried, no matter how deep the darkness, no matter how heavy the burdens. In Africa, we have a saying: when the sun rises, even the longest shadow disappears. And so it is with the human spirit. No matter how long the nights of hardship may seem, no matter how cruel the world may appear, the light within a person of courage and hope will always find a way to shine. Amara's light, once hidden in the shadows of neglect and sorrow, now illuminated every path she walked. And to those who heard her tale, it became a reminder that life, though sometimes harsh, has a way of rewarding patience, resilience, and faith. Her story, like the rising sun, continues to inspire hearts, teach lessons, and awaken hope, prove that even in the deepest darkness, light will always triumph. And so, dear friends, the tale of Amara comes to an end. But remember, there are many more African stories waiting to be told, stories of love, betrayal, hope, and destiny. If this story touched your heart, do not let it fade into silence. Tap like to honor Amara's journey, and subscribe so that you never miss another tale from the heart of Africa. Until we meet again, may your light always rise, just like the morning sun.